Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, waiting up to 18 weeks for surgery, often in pain, is an unpleasant prospect. But now NHS patients in England are being warned they may have to wait longer for routine operations such as hip and knee replacements, cataract removal and hernia operations. Well, speaking to Today on BBC Radio 4, Simon Stevens, the head of NHS England, says it's a trade-off for improvements in other areas, such as the 4-hour A&E target and better cancer care. He says increasing patient demand and the growth in new treatments means that radical choices have to be made.
The NHS has made huge strides over the course of the last 10 or 15 years in cutting long waits for operations, and we're determined not to go back from that. So people, I think, would be surprised to remember that 15 years ago you might be waiting 18 months for your hip or your knee operation. Now, 9 out of 10 people, it's 18 weeks. The average wait for an operation is 10 weeks. Now, what we're saying is that over the next couple of years, we want to have more funded operations on the NHS, but we recognise that the rate of growth is probably going to have to be a little bit slower than it has been at points in the past, because we also want to make big improvements in cancer care, in GP services and in mental health services as well.
But you will know that Claire Marks of the Royal College of Surgeons has said that there is a risk that you will have unacceptably long waits, a return to that, and suggesting that the 18-week target has now effectively been jettisoned.
It hasn't. The reality is that there are pressures right across the health service. They're well known. And under those circumstances, we have to make a start on sorting out particularly those pressures in A&E departments, which we've seen over the course of the last winter. It's right that we start with the most urgent and pressing problems, but then over the course of the next several years, we want to be able to continue to expand the amount of surgery that's being done so that waiting times stay low. Fact is that we're providing 5,000 more operations a day now than we were in 2010, and we've got one of the lowest waiting times for routine non-urgent operations of any industrialised country.
Now, under the current NHS guidelines, 92% of patients with non-urgent conditions should be treated within 18 weeks of referral by their GP. The maximum waiting time for suspected cancer is 2 weeks from GP referral. If a hospital or service cancels your appointment at the last minute, they should offer another date within 28 days. Well, we were hoping to speak to Hugh Pym. He's not with us right now, but we can speak to Christine Moon. She's currently on an NHS waiting list for a single coronary bypass. We also speak to Tim Briggs, who's a consultant orthopaedic surgeon and the NHS's National Director for Clinical Quality and Efficiency. Christine, first of all, tell us your situation.
I saw my cardiac surgeon last November. I was told 18 weeks. At the end of the 18-week period, I phoned the hospital to try and find out when I might be admitted. I was told they could give me no idea at all. They were completely backlogged. They got people in critical care beds who were blocking beds. And I was told nobody in the hospital could give me any idea of when my operation was likely to take place.
So what, you just sit and wait now for the hospital to contact you and give you a date? So
in actual fact, I've done that. I've decided to go privately because I just cannot carry on my life waiting for this to happen. It's like having a sword hanging over my head.
Are you feeling unwell yourself, or is it the simple logistics of feeling you're in limbo?
It's the logistics of feeling I'm in limbo. I'm taking 6 tablets a day to alleviate my symptoms. And I guess there are a lot of people in a lot worse condition than I am who are waiting and have probably been waiting maybe even longer than me. 18 weeks, it means nothing, absolutely nothing.
I want to bring in Tim Briggs now. You're a consultant orthopaedic surgeon. I guess many of your patients are the very people who are going to be affected by this announcement today.
I think that if you look in the round of what the NHS has done in the last 15 years to bring down waiting times to the historical lows we have at the moment, it really has been an amazing job by many people. And if you look at the National Joint Registry, founded in 2003, when there were 47,000 joint replacements registered in 1 year, and last year it was over 200,000, it just shows you the rising demand, and with the ageing population and the demands on the health service. So I think the health service should be congratulated really on the actual work it's done in the last few years to bring the waiting times down to the historical lows that we see now. And patients, in terms of quality, timing of the operation is not the only aspiration. It's also getting the best quality outcome. And so it's a mixture of the two components that produce the best result for patients.
But that doesn't help the likes of Christine, who's sitting there. I can see her face. She's pulling faces, shaking her head, clearly disagreeing with what you're saying. Lots of people have got in touch with our programme today telling us about the delays they're facing already, and this is going to get worse. For people who are in pain, this is no comfort at all.
I think that we have to look at what's happening at the moment in the accident emergency departments. They're under a huge amount of pressure. More patients being admitted to hospitals, delayed transfers of care, which I hope has been resolved with the Chancellor's announcement in the budget of the £2 billion, meaning that there's been a lot of pressure on our beds. And so what we have to do if we're going to provide a sustainable health service going forward, to provide excellent timely care for patients, is that we've got to free up those beds. And the way we do that is we increase the discharge rate from our patients from hospital, which has been announced in the budget with the increased funding of £2 billion for social care. But we've also got to sort out the front end of the hospital, which is A&E departments. So reducing the number of patients that come to hospital, to the A&E department, the number of patients that are admitted, sometimes not necessarily being admitted. And so we've got to resolve that if we're going to have the bed capacity enable us to provide the ongoing elective care for our patients. So I welcome the report in many ways. I'm an orthopaedic surgeon, I'm at the front line, I treat patients, and I think patients will understand that what we've got to try and do is sort out the system so that we can maintain the frequency of which we can deliver the 18-week target for patients. And I don't believe it is being jettisoned, actually. What we're trying to do is sort out the system so that we can maintain it as we go forward.
Well, Professor Briggs, I wonder if Christine understands. You say most patients will understand this and you welcome this report today. Christine, feel free to speak to Tim Briggs.
I don't understand, because you say that you're trying to sort out the problems in A&E. In the area that I live, the hospitals and the A&E departments and local hospitals, I realise, are under immense pressure. There is a walk-in unit being established in Corby, which I read with absolute horror is now due to close due to lack of NHS funding. Why?
So respond to that. I've been in the privileged position in the last 2 years of visiting every single hospital in England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. And overall, the pressure on A&E departments is huge. And they've had huge pressures, as we all know, over the winter months. And we've got to try and resolve that, because the more patients that come through the front door and get admitted to hospital with delays of transfer means that there are not the beds available to do the cold elective planned surgery. And what we've got to do over the next 24, 36 months is to try and resolve that issue. So what Simon Stevens said today was, no one's jettisoning the 18-week target. We want that to be the norm for our patients, but we've got to sort out the service at both the front end and the back end to mean that we've got the elective capacity and the beds in order that we can get these elective cases done.
I do think, though, that you should not inform patients about this magical 8 weeks waiting time when clearly it means nothing. I would rather be told you might have your surgery in a year. If we can bring it forward, we will do. Why not be honest up front? Why say 18 weeks when obviously it means nothing?
What I'd say to that is that I work, as I say, in a provider hospital, and all the NHS staff are working tirelessly and very hard to try and make sure that they maintain the elective service as efficiently and effectively and as high quality as they can. But we've been under a lot of pressure, as we know, And what we've got to do is just have a bit of a breathing space and time to sort out the front and back end of the hospital to free up these beds. What I don't want to see, and what will not happen, is going back to historical times of the past where people waited 3 years, 18 months for surgery. But we've got to have a bit of breathing space, I believe, in order to sort out the system so actually we can maintain the elective capacity to do our elective surgeries at the appropriate time. And that is what we're trying to do.
Professor Tim Briggs, thank you for coming onto the programme. Christine as well, thank you and best of luck with getting a date for your operation. Now, as part of today's proposals, the NHS says it wants to stop children and young people having to travel far from home for mental health care. We can also talk now to Marjorie Wallace of the mental health charity SANE, and we can speak to Sally Burke, whose teenage daughter Maisie was admitted to 10 hospitals in the last 3 years. None of them were near their home. Sally, I want to come to you first of all. So give us a sense of how difficult that has been for you, coping with Maisie being in so many different places around the country.
Well, it's horrendous because as a family we've not been able to support Maisie when she's been at her most vulnerable, and it's been very difficult as a parent to know that your child needs you, but she's at least an hour away, and some of the phone calls that I've had from Maisie or the police or from the unit are really difficult to deal with, and not be able to take part in trying to help Maisie through that is really horrible.
And presumably you had to travel each time, so there's a cost implication as well.
Yes, always a cost.
And what about the cost to Maisie about being in so many different places? Was that problematic for her?
Absolutely, because each admission has caused more problems for Maisie. None of them have been helpful in helping her get over her problems. She's become homesick, she's lost touch with friends and the community, school. It's had a knock-on effect massively to all of the aspects in Maisie's life.
Marjorie, you're nodding. Is this just about more money, about providing more beds, more units, so that people can, like Maisie, be treated closer to her home?
A lot of it is. It's also about an attitude to mental illness, so that it's treated with the same seriousness as physical illness. I mean, we're hearing about waits of 18 weeks, but in mental illness it's sometimes years, and sometimes there are no beds available at all. And the problem that's happened is that there are no local beds available. We've actually lost half the number of psychiatric beds since 2000. 25,000 beds have been closed down. Now that means that a person who becomes critically ill, like Maisie was, who's self-harming, who's suicidal, they go to A&E and they're sent home, and it's really on a wing and a prayer that the community mental health team will come.
Sally, how did you manage to access that care for Maisie?
Well, sometimes we've had to wait up to 2 weeks for Maisie to be able to be admitted to a bed, and it's just been cope at home. If you're not coping, ring the police, and then, you know, that has a knock-on effect because the police are not happy about that because it's a mental health problem. Really, I've had to fight every system as a parent. I've had to challenge every decision, and it's not just about more money, because sending Maisie away to a bed costs a lot more than if they provided proper care at home and support to keep her at home in the community with the right support and care that she needs.
What support and care would she need to stay at home in the community?
She would need experienced, trained staff that working around the clock with her at the moment to be able to get Maisie to a steady ground so that she can reintegrate back into routine and into life.
And Marjorie, would that be a cheaper option than sending Maisie to a unit, for example?
Not necessarily, because you've got to have an intensive investment in that person. What we're finding again and again at SANE, we get so many calls, is that people are not admitted to the hospitals, not admitted to units, and they are then put under the care of the crisis resolution teams. And the rate of suicide amongst mental health patients under these teams has actually trebled in 13 years and is 3 times as that much in hospital. So these community teams, they're all having cutbacks at the moment. It's not just the closure of beds, the cutbacks on the teams. And so they just don't have the time to spend with people. And so it puts people who need that time at risk.
So for you, Sally, what difference will these extra beds, these extra units make to Maisie if there was to be another situation where she needed to be admitted, if there was a a bed near your home. What difference does that make to you and your family?
It would mean that people could go and visit her daily. She could come out into the community. So if we had a family birthday, she could take part in that instead of feeling isolated and lonely. She could access school. So her routine would continue. Plus, the people that are in her care when she would need a bed, that would be in our community. So that experience and those professionals would be always on at Maisie's doorstep.
And how is
at that level?
How is she now?
She has just come out of a unit last week. She is trying to transition back into normal life. She's up and down, very sad at the moment.
Well, Sally, thank you for coming on. Best of luck to Maisie, and thank you also, Marjorie, for joining us. Lots of your comments still coming in. We've had an email from Elsie about the NHS. I live in Northern Ireland and suffer from glaucoma, which could eventually lead to blindness if not managed properly. I was due to see my consultant in December 2016, which would have been once a year checkup. When I rang this morning to check why I hadn't received an appointment, I was told that the consultant had retired and that no one had been put in place yet to take over the running of the clinic. I was further told if I had any problems with my eyesight to consult my GP. As you all know, that at present we have no sitting government in Northern Ireland due to the elected representatives refusing to sit down with each other to run our country. My problem is minor, but there are others with greater problems who are not getting the treatment that they greatly need. Thanks for getting in touch with us. Keep them coming. Now, lots of you are getting in touch with us this morning about the NHS, the changes which are coming. The head of NHS England has been talking about a trade-off. There'll be more money for cancer services, better facilities at A&E to try and reduce waiting times. But the trade-off is you're going to have to wait longer for routine operations. We've asked you to share your stories this morning. Kath has emailed, cancellation of my aneurysm operation twice. I turned up and waited 7 hours, then it was cancelled. My family had taken time off work to look after me. I'm 88. Mark has emailed saying, I've been waiting for a follow-up appointment with a specialist since April 2016, only to have it put back to April 2018, 2 years, wow. And we also had another comment here. Kiri has tweeted saying, my dad has been waiting for a second hip operation for 6 years. NHS staff do a fab job on the ground, but this needs sorting out. Keep sending your stories to us. We're on the hashtag Victoria Live. We've had lots of emails with people getting in touch with us about their stories waiting for hospital operations. This email from Pauline, I suffered a stroke in 2015. Luckily, it only affected my speech. 3 months later, I started having difficulty eating and swallowing. I was referred to hospital after various tests which confirmed I had a patch, a small raised bump that caused me to constantly have a feeling of something being stuck. I went for my appointment in February and was told there was no funding for the operation. I could wait until the new financial year and then try again. I agreed and will be going back in May, but it may still not go ahead then. Well, the boss of the NHS England, Simon Stevens, is shortly going to outline his blueprint for the health service waiting times. Let's get more now from our health editor, Hugh Pym. So, Hugh, we know the highlights here. Some people unhappy. Routine operations are likely to be delayed further, but more money for A&E and cancer services.
That's right, Chloe. We're going to get the speech in just a few minutes' time in the health centre behind me, the Aldershot Centre for Health. And the reason we're here is Simon Stevens wants to make the point that centres like this can do a lot of health activity in the community away from hospitals. It's one of the largest of its kind in the country. They have scans here, pharmacists as well as GP services. So that's the point, more investment in this sort of facility, and he says you won't need to refer so many people to hospital. But he has conceded, as you've been hearing, that waiting lists will have to rise for routine surgery, and that is not popular with those affected by it. He's also going to talk about how generally community care can be enhanced between health and social care around England.
Well, Hugh, thank you for that.
I've been getting